Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the weekly MMA Cycles Market Update. Today is the 13th of March, 2024. This is Gianni DePoce, your host, and I'm joined this week, very special guest, Dan Waits, from England, but you're in Thailand, correct, Dan?
That's right. I'm in Phuket, Thailand right now.
Very nice. Well, thank you so much for joining me, Dan. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Yeah, really, really glad to be here.
Fantastic. So we're going to have a discussion on some financial markets, just at a surface level, and also some upcoming mundane astrological aspects that Dan thinks are important and on his radar. So let me go ahead and share my screen real quick and just review what's been going on in the financial markets over the last couple of days. So we had an inflation report yesterday in the United States that came in above estimates, but stocks responded pretty well to the report, despite concerns that the Fed may not be raising interest rates as soon as the market may be pricing in. So stocks finished higher, and we did just have Venus ingress into the sign of Pisces, which may end up being a little bit more pertinent for the cryptocurrency market, which we'll discuss in a moment. But we're almost in spring season. Aries season starts on the 19th of March this year, and just a couple of days before we'll have a conjunction between the Sun and Neptune. But what we're really looking at from a short-term geocosmic standpoint is Venus conjunct Saturn next week. Usually we like to buy markets falling into that signature, but right now we're rising, so we need to be alert for a high of significance to form. So, Dan, I know you like to look at the mundane picture, but from an economic standpoint, do you have any concerns about some upcoming geocosmics and how that might affect the economy and perhaps even stock markets?
Well, I think we're entering quite a volatile period from a geocosmic perspective, particularly in terms of what's coming in April next month. There's a lot going on that month, all in one month. So there are many things that are happening all at the same time. One of the main things I'm looking at is a Jupiter-Uranus conjunction. These conjunctions only come along every 14 years or so.
Yeah.
Now they can bring cultural, technological breakthroughs, things of that nature. But I've also seen them repeatedly come up with sparks that set off sort of revolutionary or liberatory movements, conflicts. If you look at some of the years when these have happened, 1775, the American Revolutionary War, 1789, the French Revolution, 1914. There are lots of these years and these times when these conjunctions have been in play that we've seen a lot of turbulence. That's not the only thing that's happening, though, in that month. We also have a eclipse, which I think many of your viewers may know about, which will be visible over the United States. Yeah. These are always sort of dynamic and volatile times. And we have a Mars-Saturn conjunction as well. And Mars will be ruling the eclipse that's taking place on the 8th of April, conjunct Saturn. Mars-Saturn conjunctions themselves are also quite challenging aspects. So there's a lot going on all in one month.
That's really interesting how you brought up the some of the historical conjunctions between Jupiter and Uranus. If I'm not mistaken, we had one in the early 1940s before the splitting of the atom too. So there's a couple geopolitical fronts of tension unfolding now, and you have this advent of AI and all this new technology. It makes me wonder, could we see some sort of new weapon system deployed? With Mars ruling the eclipse, all these hard aspects and whatnot. And then, the proliferation of a conflict that's ongoing. So do you have any take on, perhaps this time compared to the 1940s geocosmically?
Well, there are some interesting similarities because the conjunction of Jupiter and Uranus in 1941, the one that you're referring to, took place in Taurus, tropical Taurus, the same sign that the conjunction we're about to have took place in. So, any conjunction in Taurus, we can wonder if it is going to have something to do with perhaps finance and value. Taurus has a lot to do with these kind of things, but really there's a very tangible material things. I would also wonder about the possibility for technological breakthroughs. And you might be right, actually, in terms of sort of the deployment of some kind of new weapon. I mean, we have a very volatile situation geopolitically right now. So there is that concern that we might see some kind of flashpoint, or some kind of event that will, I think, set things off in a way that a lot of people aren't expecting.
Well, to that point, as I look across financial markets, it seems like something is being discounted or priced in. Obviously cryptocurrencies, everybody talking about that right now, Bitcoin hitting new all-time highs. So we're rallying into this Jupiter-Uranus signature, which is a very, I would call it almost climactic, qualitative sense, for that signature. And, Ethereum making new highs as well, not quite a new all-time high, but, I don't think we're quite at that point of an integration with, blockchain into the, mainstream financial system. But it is definitely noteworthy, especially when you look at gold. Gold finally hitting a new all-time high after, a few months in congestion zone. So usually when precious metals start doing well, it's a sign that tensions or uncertainty is rising. And I always hesitate to, throw around, things are uncertain, because the world is always uncertain to an extent, right? But I think we can agree that there are varying levels of uncertainty that, we have to grapple with on a mundane level and an economic level. So it seems like there's some chess pieces being moved across in the financial markets. But I know there was another signature that you were looking at this summer that starts in August, the Jupiter-Saturn square. So why don't you tell me a little bit about that, Dan?
Yeah, absolutely. So, well, I would actually say that this is going to start being in play from around the 25th of May. The reason being that that's when Jupiter will move into the sign of Gemini, and then it will be square by sign with Saturn. Yeah. So we may already start to see sort of things being put in place at that time. But as you mentioned, the first exact square between these two planets comes on the 19th of August. There's another at the 24th of December, and another one next year on the 15th of June. Now, what to take from this? Well, one of the things that I'm thinking about is tracking this particular cycle, this Jupiter-Saturn cycle, because aspects don't really do things in a vacuum. They're actually part of cycles that unfold over time. So if we look back to the conjunction of these two planets, Jupiter and Saturn conjoined at the end of 2020, December 2020. So that was the start of the cycle, and the themes that this cycle is concerned with were set at around that time. And if you look at what happened around that time, that was when the first COVID-19 vaccines came onto the scene. They were rolled out almost exactly when that conjunction happened. And the other thing is, I think just a few days after that, OpenAI released the first version of DALL-E, which is this very, one of the AI models that just started to blow people's minds in 2023, when it really started to reach maturity and we started to see that these things can do actually very powerful, impressive things. So I think some of those themes may be coming up as well, maybe reactivated somehow when we see this Jupiter-Saturn square. We might start to see, a square is an aspect of friction. So I think we might start to see some kind of teething problems, perhaps, with this technology. And I'm quite mindful of the potential for AI to create deep fakes, fake news, all this kind of thing in an election year. So this is one of the things, especially with Jupiter in Gemini, which is this sign of communication. Jupiter in Gemini is kind of expanding in every direction. So I think one of the things we might start to see is this real excess of information, particularly AI generated information around that time. It's going to be one of the themes that we're going to be dealing with over the next couple of years and probably beyond.
Well, Gemini is important as well for commerce, right? It's the sign that rules commerce. Obviously, financial markets, reflect commercial activities. So, Jupiter and Gemini, it just makes me wonder, is there some sort of, exaggerated reports, exaggerated communications that lead to, markets misbehaving in a certain way? But, you have those three square signatures. And what's interesting about the third exact square is that both Saturn and Jupiter will be in different signs than the first two. And then the first one, if I remember correctly, Jupiter is retrograde during the first square, Saturn's retrograde during the second square, and then the third one, they're in different signs. So it's like every square will be different from some sort of qualitative standpoint. And, in 2020, the Federal Reserve, they were doing quantitative easing. They were, had interest rates at zero. And, from a mundane economic standpoint, we like to associate Jupiter with expansionary economic policies, Saturn with contractionary economic policies. So, now they're talking about raising interest rates, or excuse me, cutting interest rates. But like I said at the beginning of this video, you have some persistent inflationary problems. So you can't really do that from an economic standpoint and expect good results. Not to mention, there's also reports coming off of the Bank of Japan, who was the most aggressive in their monetary policy stimulus over the last decade or so, may finally be leaving their negative interest rate policy. So what I'm looking at here from an economic standpoint is, do we see the central banks flip-flop back and forth and say, oh, we're going to cut rates. Oh, we're going to, maybe raise rates now. Maybe we're not going to do anything. And I don't know, Jupiter in Gemini, it's kind of like exaggerated promises, like, oh, we'll take care of the economy. We'll make sure interest rates or, inflation doesn't run too hot. But Saturn's in here to say, oh, well, then the growth's going to slow down. So it's kind of like a pick your poison. So any additional insight on, kind of the variations among the three squares?
Well, in terms of the variations, yeah, I'm not sure what I could add on that, but I definitely think we're going to see some kind of sort of sense that the things aren't quite as rosy as we thought. Saturn is squaring Jupiter. It's in using traditional principles, it's even in what we call a superior position to Jupiter. It's squaring that planet, and it's saying actually, no, hold your horses. It's not time to move. You're too optimistic here. And that's generally how these two planets interact. We have Jupiter, planet of faith and optimism. Saturn, much more cautious and about saying no and turning things down.
What about from a mundane geopolitical standpoint? Anything that you're looking at for country natal charts or world leader natal charts that you think could be, ignition points, let's say, over the next several months?
Yeah, so I mean, there are some things that I'm concerned about. One of the things that I'm wondering about next month actually is what's coming with this Jupiter-Uranus conjunction. We've seen when Uranus has reached the degree that it's moving to, where it's going to conjoin Jupiter, that there was a lot of turbulence and violence in the Middle East. There are a few country natal charts that are actually getting stimulated by that conjunction around the Middle East, including Israel, including I think Syria is another one, potentially Iran. I'm a little bit worried that we might see more violence or expansion to what's going on there. Actually, if you trace back Uranus's movements to that degree, 21 degrees of Taurus, it's already been on that degree twice, right? This is the third and final time it's going to hit it, but this time it will be with Jupiter. But the two previous times, one of the things that I did catch was that Iran had announced new advanced missiles, which had then been received. Like the West had responded and condemned the development of these new weapons, but that we saw that coming up on both occasions actually when Uranus was at that degree. So that's definitely an area of concern. And I think the other thing to think about is this Mars-Saturn conjunction. That's a 2-year cycle, which is going to unfold, and generally it's a sort of 2-year cycle of challenging events. Now, if we look at the one that happened in 2020, that cycle was really correlated to the COVID pandemic. The one that happened in 2022 actually timed major developments in the Russia-Ukraine conflict. And so we're going to enter a new one of these 2-year cycles. You can think of these as kind of cycles of misfortune on a mundane level. The two planets are in Pisces, this sign that does have something to do with liquidity, I think, with flow. You have to wonder about what effects that might have on those themes. Mars is a planet that wants to move. Saturn says no, and so could we see some kind of effects on trade and markets? Perhaps things are somehow breaking down and the movement isn't possible, and that then shapes the developments of the next 2 years.
Yeah, you were when you were talking about the eclipse and Mars and Saturn, how Mars is going to rule the eclipse. I don't know if you do any work with asteroids, but you also have Chiron that's going to be in conjunction with the North Node too. So, and it's in the sign of Aries. So, wounded healer type thing in the sign of war, and we're going into spring season, which historically was always the time for military campaigns to begin. Yeah, that's definitely I think it could be an inflection point. So I think the big thing is that we'll see some big pivots at a mundane level. I don't know about you, but it does seem things are almost like eerily quiet right now. And looking at the geocosmics coming up, I don't think that's going to last much longer. So we'll have our answer sooner rather than later. Dan, any final thoughts on anything that you're looking at from a geocosmic standpoint?
The other thing to think about as well is the eclipse, as you mentioned. It's happening in the sign of Aries. This is the sign in which the sun is exalted. But eclipses, since I think the very beginning of astrological practice, have been associated with changes to leadership, having effects on those figures who are central and visible by all. Now, if we go back to the last time that there was we were seeing eclipses in the sign of Aries with the North Node as we are now. We go back to 2005. There was actually an eclipse that year in May. I think it was April 2005 at 19 degrees of Aries. This is the same degree that we're seeing this eclipse now. Now, what happened that very week? The Pope actually died. You don't really get a more central or visible figure than that. And at the same time, Prince Charles, who, as he was then known, King Charles now, married Camilla Parker Bowles, who's now Queen. Those people are also very much in the news right now. There's a lot going on regards to the British royal family, and I think it's very interesting to see the resonances between what happened at the last eclipse at this degree, the fact we have this eclipse coming, and what we're hearing about them right now.
Wow. Well, that's all fantastic. Thank you for sharing that. Dan, where can our viewers find out more about you and your work?
Well, the best place to find me is on my YouTube channel. Its name is World Astrology Report. So just search for that in YouTube. You'll find me, and I'm putting out regular videos focused on geopolitical, mundane astrology.
Fantastic. Well, Dan, thank you so much for joining us. And everyone, please check out Dan's work and also subscribe to our channel. We just published the monthly cycles report yesterday and on Monday, which is MMA's flagship market analysis. So all of our updated outlooks on stocks, bonds, commodities, and currencies have been issued. This upcoming weekend, we will have, well, actually at the beginning of next week, we will have the publication of the monthly Shanghai report. Interesting developments happening over in China as well. So if you're interested on our take for that market, definitely check it out. And of course, we'll have the monthly ETF report issued next week. So that takes care of our announcements for today. Thank you all so much for joining us. You can find us at www.mmacycles.com. We will be back same time, same place next week. Thanks again, everyone.